Hey, Brennan here. Welcome to the channel and thanks for tuning in. Well, we're going to finish our fantasy positional series here on the 2025 class. And today we're going to talk about the tight ends. I'm going to be joined by Jason DiRienzo, my podcast co-host, and we're going to give you our top 10 tight ends right now going to the 2025 NFL draft. And then we've got a series of burning questions, right? How good is this class compared to, the 2024 and 2023 class? We've only had one tight end taken in the last 2 years in the first round. Are we going to see maybe one or two or even maybe three this year? I think it's a pretty deep class overall. We're going to talk about our best landing spots. How many day one producers are we going to have next year on our dynasty rosters out of this group? I think it's a deep group at the tight end position. I think we're going to get 2 or 3 quality dynasty assets, hopefully. So you play dynasty, you play fantasy, and you're looking for a YouTube channel out there that's going to give you an early look, not just at the 2024 rookie class, but 2025, 2026, and even 2027. Hit that subscribe button. Let's get to the show. Jason, let's get to our top 2025 tight end board. I'm going to go through what we're going to do. Let's just list our top 10 briefly for everyone. I'll list mine, then you can list yours, and then we'll have some good discussions on what we think of the class overall. So I got Tyler Warren, number 1 from Penn State. Just love his versatility all over the field. Colston Loveland, of course, from Michigan. Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. Has just had a tremendous season. All 3 of these players are alignment versatility players, which is certainly nice. Mason Taylor from LSU, was hoping he had a little bit more production this year, but the athleticism on the field is pretty easy to see. Gunnar Helm from Texas, playing extremely well. He is having a breakout season right now. Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, I think, is an underrated tight end. Jake Briddingstall, athletic guy, little on the small side, thin, but again, we're looking for pass catchers, for our dynasty purposes. And Oronde Gadsden II from Syracuse, I think he's going to be more of a wide receiver. I don't see him really lining up at a tight end much, but again, he could be a big slot and utilized all over the field. So I like his game. Elia Arrero from Miami had a big touchdown this past week. A lot of buzz talking about him. Again, here's a player who has very little production, might go to the combine and kill it. But, here we are at the 9th tight end. So he's at the back end of the top 10. And then I got Caden Prescorn from Ole Miss, just a reliable, pass catcher in the middle of the field for Jackson Dart. So that rounds out my top 10, tight ends that are on my 2025 big board. What do you got?
I mean, we're not too different. My tight end 1 is Colston Loveland. At 2, I have Tyler Warren, so we're the same, just flip flopped. At 3, I have Mason Taylor. I do like what I've seen from him. I think he is almost a Michael Mayer-ish type of receiver. So I kind of like what he's been doing for LSU. Gunnar Helm. And then I have at 5, Harold Fannin Jr. At 6, I have Oronde Gadsden. 7, Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon. 8, Elijah Arrero out of Miami. I have Luke Lachey at 9. I just can't give up on Luke Lachey yet. I'm hoping the injuries were what's kind of limiting him this year. And then Caden Prescorn at 10, the Ole Miss tight end that you just talked about as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest disappointment for me in the tight end room this year was, Benjamin Urasek, who really looked good at Stanford. Going to Georgia, man, I just don't know what's going on. I mean, they used Brock Bowers so much last year, and then they bring in this guy. They got Lawson Lucky, and they can't get any tight end production in Georgia this year. But there's some interesting names on the back end out of that top 10, everybody. I mean, you got Brent Kuthi from Utah, really explosive player, but he's a little undersized at 6'2", 236.
Yeah, he's undersized. Yeah.
Brian Nesbitt. You've got Mitchell Evans, one of your guys from Notre Dame. Hasn't been able to get the production, but he probably come back for his. I think he's got one more year. He was injured last year, but so I mean, I think overall the tight end class to me is pretty solid, right? So the question is, how many of these tight ends are we going to get early draft capital, right? So how many do you see getting draft capital in round 1? All right. So just to give you a little bit of history, I'd love giving you my draft capital history lessons in these shows. The 2024 draft, we only had 1 last year with Brock Bowers. In 2023, we only had 1 with Mr. Dalton Kincaid. So I've seen a lot of mocks, I'm Mr. Mock Draft, right? And I see Colston Loveland is really the only tight end being mocked in the first round. Do you think that holds true by the time April rolls around?
I think Tyler Warren could fight to get into the back end of the first. I really do.
Me
He's
too.
having a tremendous season, and honestly, he could fight Colston Loveland for that tight end one spot. And I know that that's something that you're pounding the table on, and I totally understand it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Those
I
two,
agree
I
with you.
think, are the ones I feel the best.
Yeah, I think there's without question, those are the only two that would get
Yeah,
round one draft
yeah.
capital. All right, now round two, right? We want our tight ends two that we pick. So last
Mhm.
year we had only one tight end taken in round two. It was kind of a down class
Wow.
last year. You know, we
Oh,
had
okay.
we had Brock Bowers as at the top, right? And then after
Right.
that, there was really only one other tight end I think people were interested. We just kind of talked about him, right before the show, and that was Ben Sinnott going to Washington Commanders. He got
Yeah.
round two. In 2023, we had 5 tight ends taken off the board, which was interesting. And the only
Yeah.
two out of those 5 that are worth discussing is potential dynasty, current dynasty assets is Sam Laporta, who's killing it, right, for the
Yeah.
Lions. And then Michael Mayer, who unfortunately got buried. He's been hurt all year, has
He's on
gotten,
IR right now.
yeah, and he's got buried by Brock Bowers. So it'll be interesting to see if
Yeah.
he can come back. So if let's assume Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland get first round draft capital, are you thinking, Harold Fannin Jr., Gunnar Helm, Mason Taylor? Where do you think they fall in? Do you think they're
I
round two
feel good
guys?
about Yeah, I feel good about Mason Taylor and Gunnar Helm in round 2. I like Harold Fannin Jr. a lot, but I do know that he's not at that particular prototypical size. I think he's around like that 230 range. And coming from Bowling Green, there is going to be a developmental transition that he's going to have to
Mhm.
make. And sometimes, as far as the tight end, it could take a little while. I feel a little bit better if I knew a team was going to try to use him as a bigger receiver at first and let
Mhm.
him develop into that tight end role. But I think Mason Taylor and Gunnar Helm, I feel good about in the second round.
Yeah, I think Harold Fannin kind of falls into that Ben Sinnott framework for me. I think that's
Yeah,
kind
that
of
wouldn't surprise
where
me at all. Yeah.
so I don't disagree with you there. Now, round three in 2024, we only had one um and I know his name's on the show sheet, but I'd probably give you $150 if you could have named him if I didn't have him on the show sheet. But Tip Ryman, I know he was the only one drafted
Dude,
in 2024. So we had only had 3
went to
tight
the
ends.
Cardinals. That was the weirdest pick.
Yeah, so only 3 tight ends in the first 3 rounds last year. Very weak class in 2024, right? So,
Yeah.
and then last year in 2023, there were 3 taken, and Tucker Kraft is the only one who's doing anything right now in Dynasty. So he was the only one. This is where I can see Terrace Ferguson, maybe Britting Stoll, kind of coming off the board, getting that day 2 draft capital.
Yeah, actually, honestly, the only one that I feel might rise is Elijah Herrero, but the injury concerns are probably too much. But I think the combine's gonna be very friendly to him. And maybe Luke O'Shea, but none of these guys to me, I don't see anybody that's a day 2 outside of who we already talked about with Gunnar Helm and Mason Taylor. I think the rest are outside of they're probably day 3.
Yeah, I would think so. So I think overall the classes, obviously, I think better than 2024. I mean, outside of Brock Bowers, who
Yeah, I think
could,
so.
could be so it's probably closer to the 2023 class with the Kincaid, Laporta, Tucker Kraft. I mean, how many do
Mhm.
you think? I mean, I'm thinking we could get legitimately. I think it's a pretty deep class from a dynasty standpoint. I mean, I'm thinking hopefully we get 3 starters, 3 or 4 starters. Future dynasty
I'm
starters.
hoping, there could be a Jatavian Sanders type that goes in, like, round 4. Maybe that's a
Hmm.
Rondé Gadsden or Terrence Ferguson, one of those guys that becomes a fantasy asset, kinda like Jatavian Sanders is starting to come on for Carolina, so that could
Hmm.
possibly happen. But I think 4 is probably, like, where I could feel comfortable as far as fantasy assets.
Right. So yeah, and I assume that we think that there will be, you think anybody will be year 1 impact players? I mean, let's say Colston gets drafted by Harbaugh. What kind of? I mean, everybody would love. We're going to talk about landing spots here
I
in a
mean,
second. That would get
yeah.
everyone really excited, I think.
Well, let's put it this way, Colston Loveland's a converted wide receiver, so I think that
Mhm.
he could definitely be a day 1 contributor. I mean, I think he is good enough to contribute right away, and I think Tyler Warren is the exact same way, especially with his versatility, the way that he can be used as a runner as well. So, I think those 2 you just feel the best about, and, just hoping that Gunnar Helm and Mason Taylor get a good landing spot where they can be utilized and we're not just waiting for them for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I hear you. So let's talk about some landing spots that we would be happy with these tight ends going. I mean, on our list right here, we just kind of spoke about the Chargers. I think that was a a good spot. I think the Seahawks. You had mentioned Noah Fant. Is he still there? I mean, that guy is. I'm like
I
ready to
think
move
he's
on
still
from
there.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, whether or not, like you
Yeah.
had mentioned before, if that is part of their offensive scheme to the tight ends, but I think the Rams could use. I think they got Colby
Definitely.
Parkinson there right now. The Dolphins, I think, could use, although Mike Gesicki, right? I mean,
Yeah.
dude, he's killing it right now in Cincinnati, and the Dolphins had him in the room, but I guess he couldn't block. And the Broncos probably another nice spot. And I still think the Chiefs. I mean, Wiley, towards ACL, he's out for the year. We were kind of excited about him coming out of TCU last year, but I think the Chiefs would be another landing spot. They love integrating Kelsey into that offense, so everyone's waiting.
Oh God, yeah.
See like who would be the heir apparent to that, even though he's under contract, I believe, for this year and maybe one more year. So I think overall the tight end class is a good one. And hopefully we get 3 or 4 guys. I mean, I know a lot of people don't get excited about tight ends in Dynasty, but I'll tell you, when you have a good one and they're a difference maker on your roster, you're always happy to have those Sam Laportas and stuff like that on your roster. Any final thoughts on the tight end class?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we just named off 6 landing spots. One of them already has a starting tight end with the Chiefs, so 5, and we said 4 of them we feel pretty good could be fantasy assets. So I think that is telling us exactly what to expect here. That immediately we could, at the highest ceiling, have 4 potential guys. So cut that in half. I think we could feel good about at least 2 of them contributing right away in year 1.
Yeah, I agree with this. So there's our kind of our thoughts right now on the 2025 tight end draft class.